Mr. Pathikrit Payne is a corporate consultant, columnist, television panelist, senior research fellow with Dr. Syam Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation, alumni of S. Raja Ratnam School of International Studies, NTU, Singapore. He was chief coordinator with one of the engagement groups of G20 at 2023 India. Mr. Pathikrit Payne. प्रतिभागी हैं श्री कंवल सिब्बल। आमंत्रित हैं मंच पे श्री कंवल सिब्बल। भारत के पूर्व विदेश सचिव हैं। आप एक प्रतिष्ठित कूटनीतिक कारीगर हैं। आपने तुर्की, मिस्र, फ्रांस और रूस जैसे प्रमुख देशों में भारत के राजदूत के रूप में सेवा की है। वर्तमान में आप विवेकानंद इंटरनेशनल फाउंडेशन से जुड़े हैं और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मामलों पर व्यापक लेखन करते हैं। आपको 2017 में भारत की विदेश नीति में योगदान के लिए पद्मश्री से सम्मानित किया गया। श्री कंवल सिब्बल। पद्मश्री कंवल सिब्बल से आग्रह, कृपया आप मंच पर पधारें। आपके बाद सुशांत सरीन। ऑब्जर्वर रिसर्च फाउंडेशन ORF में सुशांत सरीन एक प्रतिष्ठित पद पर हैं, जो आतंकवाद और इस्लामाबाद में अपनी विशेषज्ञता के लिए जाने जाते हैं। चरमपंथी विचारधाराओं और राष्ट्रीय सुरक्षा के जटिल पहलुओं की गहरी समझ के साथ आपने अकादमिक और नीति निर्माण सर्कल्स में एक सम्मानित आवाज स्थापित की है। श्री सुशांत सरीन। आग्रह सुशांत सरीन से, कृपया मंच पर पधारें। मेजर जनरल राजीव नारायणन। प्रतिष्ठित सैन्य पूर्व सैनिक, रणनीतिक विचारक और अकादमिक हैं, जो वर्तमान में प्रैक्टिस के प्रोफेसर के रूप में कार्यरत हैं। भारतीय सेना में सजाए गए करियर के साथ मेजर जनरल नारायणन रक्षा, भू राजनीति और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संबंधों के क्षेत्र में एक सम्मानित आवाज बन गए हैं। मेजर जनरल राजीव नारायणन। श्री अभिजीत चवड़ा। आप सैद्धांतिक भौतिक विज्ञानी, इतिहासकार, भू राजनयिक विश्लेषक और लेखक हैं। आप निर्देशक, संपादक और पॉडकास्ट होस्ट भी हैं। आपको आस्क अभिजीत शो के लिए जाना जाता है। श्री अभिजीत चवड़ा। कर्नल अजय कुमार रैना। 1990 से 2017 तक भारतीय सेना के प्रतिष्ठित अधिकारी रहे हैं। आपने कई कठिन परिस्थितियों का सामना स्वयं करते हुए भारत का मस्तक सदैव ऊंचा रखा है। आज आपका सैन्य अनुभव, आपके लेखन विशेष रूप से भारत पाकिस्तान की जटिलता, देश की व्यावसायिकता और हमारे ग्रामीण आवभगत को रेखांकित करता है। मंच पर स्थान लेते हुए कर्नल अजय कुमार रैना। इस सत्र का संचालन कर रहे हैं पथिकृत पेन। 5वें सत्र के पेन को।
Okay, starting with a small clarification. I start with a small clarification. My surname is Pine, not Pain, and I keep on telling it everywhere. First and foremost, it's such an honor to have such a distinguished panel, and I'm hosting it. Before I start, there's a small announcement of a book that is being launched by Colonel Ajay Raina ji, and the book's name is Unknown Gunmen, with a wonderful photograph of Adi Achin. Ajay ji, you can stand. Sir, you can stand with this book for a minute. Photographs. Before we start with this session, there's a small announcement of a feature film. That film, we keep talking about bringing change in the education system, especially in history, told to us in our school textbooks. There is a conversation about distorted history and has now started reaching some people in the film industries too. So there's a small Hindi feature film. Its name is His Story of Itihas, has been made on this topic, and we'll have a small clipping of that being shown here. Over to you.
क्या आप इतिहास का मतलब जानते हैं?
इतिहास is not equal to history.
हिस्ट्री वो जादूगर है जिसके जादू से इतिहास ऐसे ही खो गया जैसे कि हम तो खोए हुए लोग थे जब किसी ने हमें बाहर से आकर ढूंढा। और जो चीज कभी हुई नहीं, उन कहानियों का हम पे थोप देना, ये भी हिस्ट्री के ही जादू का कमाल है।
We are not here to confirm any biases.
नहीं मुझको कंप्लीट करने दीजिए.
First, how does history matter? आज की बात करो, फ्यूचर की बात करो. जो बीत गया वो बीत गया.
Thank God that apple fell on Newton's head.
Good marks come from.
हम ब्राह्मण लोग क्या भारत के बाहर से आए थे?
क्या बात कर रहे हो?
किताब में लिखा है.
अरे बेटा फिर वही सही है.
Name the rulers of Mughal dynasty.
Women and Shudras were not allowed to study the Vedas.
सती प्रथा खत्म.
मिनिस्टर ने मीडिया में एक स्टेटमेंट दिया है.
क्या स्टेटमेंट?
ये कि पास में वहाँ कोई स्ट्रक्चर था ही नहीं.
ऐसा लग रहा है कुछ तो गलत है बुक में.
फिजिक्स में?
नहीं, हिस्ट्री के बुक में. कुछ भी नहीं. ये भारत में कास्ट सिस्टम ब्रिटिशों ने बनाई. स्कूल में बच्चों को ये गलत और डिस्टॉर्टेड हिस्ट्री क्यों पढ़ाई जा रही है? इससे रहने बिगड़ गए.
कुछ बाहर निकालने के लिए अंदर जाना पड़ता है.
किसी ने आरटीआई फाइल किया है हिस्ट्री बुक्स के बारे में. 21 रिकॉर्ड और एविडेंस पर चीजें लिखेगी हिस्ट्री बुक्स.
They defeated Mughals 17 times. Give me a pencil.
सिर्फ आपका मन मैटर करता है.
सर मेरे सवालों का जवाब किसे
हो गया सर. सर सुनिए मुझसे सर हो गया. चलिए उनसे बात करना है.
Let the historians do their job.
सब कुछ बिगड़ता जा रहा है.
We will create an educational system in India so that future Indians will be Indians only in color, but will be English in taste, intellect, habit, and language.
Very nice. Which class?
हिस्ट्री के महफिल में फिजिक्स का टीचर क्या कर रहा है?
हिस्ट्री हमारी भी तो है.
We request all of you to take this opportunity of and watch this movie when it's released. Coming to the topic of this session, there are three very important words that we hear nowadays so much: strategic economy, deep state, and the rest. And the rest can mean a lot of things. Anything which is very complex, which is intriguing, excites us even more. And that's exactly how the world has evolved today. We find words like deep state has become so much part of our life. So anything happens in the neighborhood, also the deep state is perhaps being blamed. But nevertheless, these are realities. And probably before I hand over to my distinguished guests, there are 3-4 important observations that I want to make. First and foremost, the COVID was a very critical inflection point, I think. And countries like India started realizing that while globalization has its own positive benefits, it's important to develop your own resilient supply chain. It is important to have your own end-to-end means to ensure that the disruptions that may happen globally cannot completely dismantle your growth story. Then we witness how our friends suddenly remain not so good friends, and how our adversaries suddenly are a little less adversary, apparently. And a lot of structural changes are happening in the world where it is very difficult to predict what would happen next. Of course, predictions come here and there all the time. And then suddenly we realize many of the things which have existed for a long time, and we were told that these are great things. We witness the way they function may not always be, I'm not saying that entirely, but always be in the greatest interest of the countries. We hear words like regime change. We hear words like NGOs having a deliberate agenda. We hear about multilateral institutions having an agenda which is not in the interest of everyone. Apparently, this is being said, and Prime Minister of India has often talked about how it is important to reform those institutions. We see We are being pushed because we wanted to do certain things or we have done certain things, especially trying to be Atmanirbhar. So in that context, this discussion, I'm very sure is going to be very exciting. To take these forward and how to deconstruct rather what all are happening. I'll start with Ambassador Kanwal Sibbal, and we will try to have a format where we have an introductory comment of 5 to 7 minutes. Then we will have, questions and then concluding remarks. So, with your permission, I would like to ask you, how important are steps of strategic self-reliance that we witness many of the nations, probably led by India, is taking? And where do you see perhaps a pushback may come or is coming?
Well, only the big economies can think of a degree of strategic autonomy on the economic side. The smaller countries and most of the world consists of smaller countries. They don't have much of a choice. India is in a special position because of the size of our population, the size of our economy. And we are becoming increasingly an important player on the global scene. And tomorrow, what will count on the global canvas is your economic strength. Certainly, military strength and other things matter. But the road to even stronger military capacity is through the economy. Economy would include, of course, access to technology, because the race today in terms of acquiring a dominant position in the world is through technological advancement in very critical areas, which will determine, in a sense, the concerns about the future of the world, climate change, and everything else. Now, as you rightly said, the COVID crisis brought home to everyone the dangers of relying on a particular country or a particular source. And the earlier model of globalization, which was reasonably successful, of establishing efficient supply chains, gave way to reliable supply chains. That even if you are not able to meet all your needs, no country can actually manufacture everything themselves. But you should have enough capacity that in the times of crisis, you have some capacity to look after your interests. Otherwise, you can't deal with the challenges that you might be confronted with this. So when we talk about Atmanirbharta, it would be foolish on our part to think that we can be totally self-reliant. I mean, we tried that little thing before during the license Raj. It ended in a disaster. I don't think anybody wants to go down that road. What really we mean is develop our manufacturing sector, build up some capacities ourselves in critical areas, so that tomorrow, if there's a crisis, then we are not at the mercy of other countries. And this has become very critical in the area of, for example, critical emerging and critical technologies. These are going to determine the power balances in the region. And if you want to be one of the big powers in a multipolar world, then you must have access to these technologies. That will depend on building your domestic infrastructure, plus very intelligently conceived cooperation with key countries, because you can't do it all alone. And then in terms of climate change pressures, the energy transition, electrical vehicles, and everything else, China has been extremely clever, because they have a highly centralized government, which developed an industrial policy which was unchallenged because they had control over everything. But on access to resources, distribution of resources, and subsidizing their companies, their industry, in order to actually develop mastery over these technologies in a very systematic way, knowing that in the future, the world will become dependent on them. And then now we see solar panels in lithium batteries. There's a huge issue. India, for example, I mean, we have this International Solar Alliance. We have this, God knows, 400, 500 gigawatts of renewable energy. Much of it is solar energy, but 80% of the world's solar cells are being controlled by China. When it comes to lithium batteries, you can see what the situation is. The United States is so fearful that if they allow Chinese imports of electrical vehicles, their own industry will be killed, apart from concerns about espionage and everything else. They have imposed 100% tariffs. Europe has imposed 30% tariffs. We have also now to take a decision whether we'll allow this or not. So in short, strategic autonomy on the economic side has become very, very necessary for a country like India, because we lose our margin of maneuver if we don't have that. And the moment we have that, then in terms of our share of the power balances in the region, we will begin to count more and more.
Wonderful. General Narayanan, I'll just ask you a question connected with what Ambassador Sibbal ended his statement. Margin of maneuver. We witness that the more we try to have a margin of maneuver to ensure that our dependence on others is not overwhelmingly so much that we get pushed back or we are completely at somebody's mercy. We see quite a bit of things happening, and then suddenly when you connect the dots, you realize there are certain invisible forces playing to make certain things happen through tools which we for a long time thought that these are honest intentions, but there are, for example, the NGOs, for example, multilateral institutions. So do you believe that what we term as a deep state, what is actually this hydra-headed creature, and is it that the threat that we have from them apparently is for real?
जय श्री राम। ये जो डीप स्टेट गहरा राज, ये गहरा राज शब्द आदि ने दिया है, और इसके ऊपर मैंने और आदि ने सबसे पहले तकरीबन 1.5 साल पहले इस पे चर्चा की थी। तब लोग हंसते थे हमारे ऊपर कि आप क्या बोल रहे हो, मनगढ़ंत कहानी बना रहे हो। लेकिन आज ये स्थिति है कि ये शब्द वैश्विक हो गया, पूरे ग्लोब में इसको इस्तेमाल करने लगे हैं। डीप स्टेट क्या है, यहाँ मैं डीप स्टेट के डिटेल्स में नहीं जाऊंगा। कल दोपहर को लंच के बाद ओपन माइक में इसी डीप स्टेट के ऊपर मैं और आदि डिस्कस करने वाले हैं। आप सब आइए, आप लोगों को डिटेल में समझाऊंगा कि ये डीप स्टेट है क्या चीज। ये एक एंटिटी नहीं है, कैसे काम करता है, क्या करता है, क्या क्या अंग है इसके जो उसके पास है और हमारे देश के अंदर भी फैले हुए हैं, उसके बारे में आपको डिटेल में व्याख्या करूंगा। अभी जैसे एम्बेसडर साहब ने कहा, आपने बताया, तो 2 चीज बताऊंगा इसमें। एक जो स्ट्रेटेजिक इकोनॉमी बताया है, और दूसरा एक लफ्ज इस्तेमाल होता है जियोनॉमिक्स। अंतर क्या है? ये स्ट्रेटेजिक इकोनॉमी को कहते हैं राजनीतिक अर्थव्यवस्था। ये देश बनाता है, ये दीर्घकालीन होता है, अल्पकालीन नहीं होता है। अल्पकालीन चश्मे पहन के आप दीर्घकालीन अर्थव्यवस्था नहीं बना सकते, ठीक है। इसके मुख्य विशेषताएं क्या होते हैं? पहली बात, सरकार पॉलिसी बनाती है। दूसरी, ये कई वैश्विक क्षेत्र हैं जिसमें वो प्रमुखता बताती है किसके ऊपर ज्यादा ध्यान देना है। जैसे डिफेंस का हो गया, एनर्जी का हो गया, आपके आईटी का हो गया, ऐसे कई वो बताते हैं। इनोवेशन एंड R&D वगैरह होता है। लेकिन इसमें सबसे अहम चीज ये होता है जो आपने पॉइंट बताया कि जो भी पॉलिसी बनाते हैं उसमें आप में सहनशीलता और संयोजन क्षमता होना चाहिए, जो एम्बेसडर सर ने भी बताया था। क्योंकि आप सब कुछ नहीं बना सकते, हम ग्लोबलाइज्ड हैं, कई चीज आपको बाहर डिपेंड भी करना पड़ता है। लेकिन जो मैं कह रहा हूं सहनशीलता, रेसिलियंस बोलते हैं उसको, आप में क्षमता होनी चाहिए जजब करने के लिए कि मैं अगर कहीं से दबाव आके रुक गया तो मैं काम कर सकता हूं। और संयोजन की क्षमता, जैसे कोविड में क्या हुआ था, सडनली कोविड हुआ, आपके पास वैक्सीन नहीं था, आपके पास मेडिसिन नहीं था, आपके पास मास्क नहीं, कुछ नहीं था, लेकिन उसको जजब करके आपने अपने संयोजन की क्षमता इतनी बड़ी बताई कि आप खुद ही नहीं, लेकिन जो कमजोर देश थे जिसको वो वैश्विक दक्षिण बोलते हैं, उनको भी आपने दिया। तो ये आपका स्ट्रेटेजिक इकोनॉमी जो बोलते हैं, रणनीतिक अर्थव्यवस्था की रणनीति बनाते हैं आप कि आज से 10 साल 20 साल किस तरह से मैंने आगे बढ़ना है। और ये रणनीति किस चीज के लिए है? जैसे अगर मोदी जी बताते हैं आपको विकसित भारत विजन 2047, तो ये उस चीज के लिए रणनीति है कि वहां तक पहुंचने के लिए मैंने क्या रणनीति इस्तेमाल करना है। अब आते हैं लफ्ज जियो इकोनॉमिक के ऊपर, वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था। उसको जैसे पिछले इसमें भी बताया था, कई चीज सत्र में बताया था, कई चीज को वेपनाइज करते हैं। तो जिसके ऊपर आप निर्भर होते हो उसको ये एक रणनीति के तौर पे आपको दबाने के लिए काम करता है। इसे जियो इकोनॉमिक्स कहते हैं। हमारे एक काफी पहले एम्बेसडर रहे थे एल रंगराजन, उन्होंने एक बहुत बढ़िया किताब लिखा है, लिमिट्स ऑफ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट नेगोशिएशन। ठीक है, उसमें ये समझाया है किस तरह से और ये 1987 में लिखा है, तब ग्लोबलाइजेशन आया नहीं था। पारदर्शिता देखिए, उन्होंने उस वक्त समझाया कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन में ये जियो इकोनॉमिक्स किस तरह से इस्तेमाल होगा और कहां कहां ये प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट करेगा। अब इस रणनीति के मुताबिक भारत ने कदम क्या लिए? एक है, जैसे मैंने कहा था, विकसित भारत, मेक इन इंडिया, आत्मनिर्भर, डिजिटल इंडिया, स्किल इंडिया, स्टार्टअप इंडिया, टेक्नोलॉजी फंड, स्मार्ट सिटीज, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, स्वस्थ सेवा और शिक्षा प्रणाली का पिछले सत्र में कहा है, अभी काफी कदम हमने चलना है, खेती और ग्रामीण विकास। अभी इन सब के लिए करने के लिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बहुत अहम है। तो इसीलिए आप देख रहे हो कि जो डीप स्टेट नहीं चाहता है कि आप प्रगति करें, आपके इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को टारगेट कर रहा है। अर्थव्यवस्था में प्रगति करने के लिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बहुत अहम है। तो इसमें मेरा केवल यही मानना है कि जब हम ये कहते हैं, यहाँ पे भी पिछले सत्रों में कहा गया कि हम 8 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी हो जाएंगे, 10 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी हो जाएंगे, वो सब ठीक है, लेकिन 2-3 बातें जो मैं समझता हूं, मैं इकोनॉमिस्ट नहीं हूं, पढ़ता हूं, कि भाई सभी प्रांत और सभी जिलों में सामान्य प्रगति होनी चाहिए, ये अहम है। और आय असमानता, इनकम डिस्पैरिटी, ये तो इनकम डिस्पैरिटी कभी जाएगा नहीं, ये तो रहेगा। उसको कितना कम कर सकते हो वो अहम है, और खास करके अर्बन, रूरल और हमारे टियर 2, टियर 3 और टियर 4 सिटीज वगैरह होते, वहां पे आपको इनकम डिस्पैरिटी कम लेके आना है। फिर इस प्रगति का कि 8 ट्रिलियन पे गए और 20 ट्रिलियन पे गए, उसका मानना है इनको ये जो कर रहे हैं उसके विरुद्ध हमारी रणनीति जारी है। कहां से? अंबानी जी के छोटे बेटे की शादी से। किसी ने पूछा कि भाई साहब, आपके बड़े लड़के और बेटी की शादी की इस तरह से आपने इतना लंबा तो खींचा नहीं, इस बेटे के लिए क्यों खींच रहे हो? सबको वो यही लगता है 5,000 करोड़ खर्च किया। उसके पीछे जो गहरे राज के लोगों के साथ आपकी वार्तालाप हुई वो आपको नजर नहीं आया। तो मैं बताता हूं आपको क्या क्या हुआ। 2 स्टेप्स। इनका कॉन्फ्रेंस होता है एनुअली, उसका डिटेल में कल बताऊंगा। हर साल भारत चर्चा का विषय रहा है, जब से हम 2000 के बाद से, जब से आपकी इकोनॉमी बढ़ती चली गई है, आप चर्चा का विषय रहे। मार्च में पहली मीटिंग होती है, हर साल अप्रैल में उनका एजेंडा निकलता है। पहली बार आप चर्चा का विषय नहीं थे, नंबर 1। नंबर 2, दूसरा प्री वेडिंग डिस्कशन एक अपना क्रूज शिप के अंदर हुआ मेडिटेरेनियन सी में, उसके बाद मई में हुआ, उसके बाद जुलाई में शादी हुई। एक क्लब ऑफ रोम है इनका जो फीडबैक देता है इनको, और जो जो देशों के साथ उनका मिलाप रहता है उसके मेंबर होते हैं। हमारे देश से मनमोहन सिंह जी मेंबर थे। जुलाई में लास्ट मीटिंग के बाद मनमोहन सिंह जी को उस मेंबरशिप से विमुक्त कर दिया। दिट मीन्स कि आपके साथ गहरा राज्य खड़ा है, उनके प्रमुख खड़े हैं, तो कौन आपके विरुद्ध है ये मैं कल बताऊंगा डिटेल में, ठीक है। तो आपको ये समझना है कि क्यों आप आगे जा रहे हो। ये इस सरकार की रणनीति है, क्योंकि इन्होंने एक विजन दिया है आपको, एक रणनीति दी है आपके अर्थव्यवस्था के प्रगति के लिए। दूसरे साइड कौन है? उनके इलेक्शन का कैंपेन क्या होता है? मोदी जी को हराना, बीजेपी को हराना, मतलब उन्हें कुर्सी चाहिए। भारत के लिए काम नहीं कर रहे हैं वो, देश के लिए काम नहीं कर रहे हैं वो, अपने लिए काम कर रहे हैं। और अगर वो आ गए तो आपकी प्रगति थम जाएगी। एक ही उदाहरण दूंगा इसका, 1 मिनट आधा मिनट लूंगा। जब वाजपेयी जी ने मनमोहन सिंह जी को हैंडओवर किया था गवर्नमेंट, भारत टॉप 15 इकोनॉमी में था। मनमोहन सिंह जी का इतना नैरेटिव बना रखा है कि वो इतने अच्छे इकोनॉमिस्ट थे, जब उन्होंने हैंडओवर किया मोदी जी को, आप फ्रेजाइल 5 में थे। तो कहां से इतने अच्छे इकोनॉमिस्ट बन गए? तो अगर ये दोबारा आते हैं तो आप समझ लो क्या होगा। ये अभी हम प्रगति कर रहे हैं, ये सारे हमारे पीछे पड़ते रहेंगे। कोई नहीं चाहेगा कि कोई नया देश ताकतवर होके ऊपर आए, लेकिन ये मौका आपको मिला है तकरीबन 2 दशक का। अगर यहां चूक हो गई तो पता नहीं कब आएगा आपको ये मौका फिर। थैंक यू।
इनफैक्ट अगर आप देखें, the journey in the last 10 years, I often say this, has been India's journey from fragile 5 economies of the world to major 5 economies of the world. In fact, Sushant ji, my question will be to you, and I had the honor to share the stage with Sushant with so many television programs. We see a pushback, Sushant ji, and we see weaponization of certain things happening. Perhaps some of the countries are not very happy that we have gone and deepened BRICS and it's what it is today. We see even the government of India, Prime Minister has spoken so much about multilateral institutions being reformed. Do you see these multilateral institutions or dollar as a reserve currency is increasingly getting weaponized against anybody, even while on the face having good relation with those countries, being used in a manner that it impacts them, that it can't, they keep on firefighting and they can't grow beyond a point? Is it like that?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not quite getting what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying some of the tools that are still being controlled by the West, whether it is the multilateral institutions or dollar as a reserve currency, do you see somewhere they are being used against any country which is trying to come out of the shackle and develop on its own?
I got it. So look, yeah, Pathikrit, I am convinced nothing which is happening in the world is new. All great powers try to preserve their dominance and they use every instrument in their toolkit to ensure that they remain dominant. If that means pushing, for example, a country like India, which is trying to say that I want to be strategically autonomous, I want to have my own foreign policy, that's going to happen. We need to be prepared for it. We need to be prepared for it. Nobody is going to pave the path towards greatness for India. I think let us disabuse ourselves of that notion. Secondly, my own definition of deep state, it's a concept which is very old. My own idea of a deep state, every state in the world has a deep state. It is the basic bunch of institutions, people, characters who decide how a state is going to be run. For me, what is important right now is that deep states around the world are in a flux. We see that in the United States. We see that in India. We had a deep state which is in a flux because there is a new dispensation which has come into power. There is going to be flux. There are going to be flux in various countries around the world. We have to see how we can navigate through this path. Again, on the economic front, yes, we will be pushed. Yes, we might fancy ourselves as whatever, but some of the stuff which I heard yesterday from some friends, look, we have the right ideas of what we want to do. We have zero idea on how we want to do it. And I think that is our big problem. So the big picture, we know what we want. Where is the details of what we want? I was talking to some friends who are sitting out here. I don't think they want to be named right now. Have we fixed our economic policies so that our business class becomes more productive? Who is it who damages this country from within? For example, if Vedanta wants to set up a copper smelter in Tamil Nadu, who is damaging that? Who all are getting into that act when a Tata company, a Tata factory is burned down? Where is that coming from? When the semiconductor complex in Chandigarh was burned down, at a time when semiconductors were just making an entry into the world, why did everybody say, okay, fine, Chandigarh mein it's burned down, ab banane ki zarurat hi nahi hai? Who took that decision? Why? And I think those are things which bother me hell of a lot. So yes, the big powers are going to do what the big powers do. We have to traverse that path. They will use dollars to maintain their dominance over the world. And if you try and challenge it prematurely, you are going to get it in the neck. Make no mistake about it. So all this bravado that I hear all over the place, I say, please hold on, bide your time. Your time will come. But before your time comes, don't, fly off the handle, imagining that you are a superpower of the world. You are still not. Why I say that is because of the strategic economy. Yes, we have made great progress, but we have to make even more progress. So, for example, are we in a position, if tomorrow we get into a war, for example, with China, are we going to be dependent on Western assistance to fight our war? Or are we in a position that if we want whatever equipment we want, we can manufacture it on our own? Do we have the technology prowess and the manufacturing prowess to be able to do it on our own? Or are we going to say, ask the Chinese, okay, look, I want to manufacture a tank. Can you please send me these 5 equipment so that I can manufacture a tank and fight against you? Which is something that the Americans are suffering from. Their strategic economy has also taken a big beating, as has the European strategic economy. So I think we need to be clear about what our capabilities are, where we are lacking, and how we need to build those to a point where the strategic autonomy that we crave for, we are able to actually put it in practice. Look, let's face it, if tomorrow the West was to start tightening the screws on us, yaar, ye to hamari kaum aisi hai, ek visa pe pit jati hai. I know people from Mr. Sibbal service who complain that every time we try and tighten our foreign policy and we say, okay, fine, we will push back against what is happening to us, some minister, some official, somebody or the other will say, can you please intercede on my behalf and get me a visa? If your country is the mar of a visa, let's not talk about deep state and strategic economy and all. It's all so much of hot air. Can we ensure that nobody in the government will ask for a visa for anybody? Can we ensure at least that much? If we can do that, then let's talk about the next steps.
No, very interesting. I mean, some of the things Sushantji mentioned, they're hard hitting, but it makes a lot of sense. Colonel Raina, let me put it this way. I strongly agree with what Sushantji said, and Ambassador Sibbal also had the right point. In fact, we had an earlier discussion and we've talked about this, that we should, hide your strength, bide your time, which is very important. But when we try to strengthen ourselves internally, try to fix some of the problems, we see there are external interference happening to prevent us from doing that. For example, if we say we need to have a strong law on banning any kind of illegal immigration, infiltration, there is a pushback. There's an external pushback. When we say we will not allow NGOs to do all the nuisance that they do here, in fact, for a long time, they actually funded, sponsored, romanticized Maoism. There's a pushback. So how do we deal with this dichotomy that we are actually hiding our strength and buying our time, but we are being prevented from doing that because there is a problem, because they think if this country becomes intrinsically strong, do you think there is a lot of penetration within the institutions itself? Over to you, sir.
नमस्कार एवरीबॉडी। जब बढ़ोगे तो आपके खिलाफ आपकी जड़ें काटने का प्रयास किया जाएगा, ये हमें समझना चाहिए। इसमें कॉमन सेंस है। अब मैं जो आपका सवाल का जवाब है, इसके दो, जनरल साहब ने भी बोला, अम्बेडकर साहब ने बोला और सुशांत सर ने भी बोला, मैं तीनों को मिला के बताता हूँ। जब हम स्ट्रेटेजिक इकोनॉमी यूज करके और हम सोचते हैं कि हम ये करेंगे, वहां पहुंचेंगे, तो यस, हमारे जो ओपोनेंट्स हैं वो जियो इकोनॉमिक्स का यूज करके हमारी उस जर्नी को डीरियल करेंगे। वो कोशिश करेंगे कि जिस रास्ते पे हम चल पड़े उसको किसी न किसी तरीके से डीरियल किया जाए। अब डीप स्टेट की बात जनरल साहब कल करेंगे, पर मैं बड़ा ग्राउंड लेवल पे समझने वाला व्यक्ति हूं, तो मैं आपको एक सिंपल चीज बताता हूं। जब भी कि देश में कोई अपोजिशन की कोई बात होती है, किसी जैसे कहा कि एक रिफॉर्म आया जहां आपने कुछ करना चाहा और उसके खिलाफ लोग खड़े हो गए, तो आपने सिर्फ तीन चीजें चेक करनी है। जो उसमें रोड़ा बन रहा है ना, राह के अंदर रोड़ा, क्या वो इलेक्टेड है, क्या वो अकाउंटेबल है, और उसके पास पावर कितनी है। ये तीन पैरामीटर आप लगाएंगे तो आपको समझ आएगी कि जैसे सर ने बोला कि हर देश में डीप स्टेट होती है। अभी आप ये पैरामीटर लगा के देखिए, हमारे देश में कौन लोग हैं जो इलेक्टेड नहीं हैं, जो अनअकाउंटेबल हैं और जिनके पास पावर है। That's one of them. Okay. So आपको कहीं दूर सोचने की जरूरत नहीं है, बट जो सवाल से बात निकल के आती है कि हमें ये पहले तो तैयार रहना पड़ेगा मेंटली कि ऐसा होगा, हमें अपना टाइम बाय करना है। निश्चय कर रखा है जीत होगी, लेकिन जरूरी नहीं कि वो जीत उस स्पीड और उस टाइम पे हो जिसमें हम करना चाहें। इसलिए हमें मेंटली प्रिपेयर रहना पड़ेगा कि हमें सेटबैक भी लगेगा, एक स्टेप पीछे भी लेना पड़ेगा, और फिर जब मौका आएगा तो आगे निकलेंगे। मगर जब भारत को आप देखते हो तो हम सबको ये भी समझना चाहिए कि जो टेम्पलेट्स ग्लोबली लगते हैं, शायद उनको हम वैसे इंडिया में नहीं लगा सकते। बहुत बड़ा देश है। मैं आपको एग्जांपल देता हूँ। अभी स्ट्रेटेजिक इकोनॉमी और स्ट्रेटेजिक जियो इकोनॉमीज कैसे यूज होती है, कि जो जैसे सवाल था, आपने सोचा कि एक स्मार्ट सिटी बने देश में, अच्छी स्मार्ट सिटीज बने और उसमें अच्छे मॉल्स बने और लोगों को सुविधाएं मिलें, तो आपने किसी ग्रुप को यहाँ मॉल खोलने के लिए बोला। वो ग्रुप किसी गल्फ नेशन से आता है। वो ग्रुप क्या करता है कि वो डिसाइड करता है कि हम फलानी स्टेट की फलानी डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स में पहले अपनी 4 मॉल खोलेंगे। अच्छा लगता है, सबको अच्छा लगता है, पर हम क्या नहीं देखते कि वो जो 4 डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स हैं वो हिंदू डोमिनेंट हैं, और उसी स्टेट में कुछ और डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स हैं जो मिक्स्ड पॉपुलेशन या दूसरी डोमिनेशन में हैं। तो ये अरब कंट्री का इन्वेस्टर एक हिंदू डोमिनेटेड डिस्ट्रिक्ट में घुस के एक मॉल खोलता है। उस मॉल में 20,000 एम्प्लॉयज रखता है, जिसमें 15,000 एक ही कम्युनिटी के हैं, और जो 5,000 हैं, जो 15,000 मेल्स हैं और जो 5,000 हैं दूसरी कम्युनिटी की लड़कियां हैं। तो फिर क्या होता है, उन 15,000 एम्प्लॉयज के साथ उसकी 15,000 फैमिलीज उस टाउन में आती हैं। हमें वो मॉल बड़ी अच्छी लगती है, उसमें शीशे लगे हैं, सब फर्स्ट क्लास है। लेकिन हम ये नहीं समझ पाते कि हमारे स्ट्रेटेजिक इकोनॉमी में, जिसने हमने सोचा था कि अपने देश को सुविधाएं बनाएं, अच्छा मॉल बनाएं, अच्छी फिल्म देखने के लिए एक थिएटर दें, जो गेम खेल गया आपके साथ, उसने अपना जियो इकोनॉमिक्स लगा दिया। अभी मैं जम्मू कश्मीर से आता हूं, बड़ी ट्रबल स्टेट है, तो मेरी फिक्सेशन है उस स्टेट के साथ। एक और एग्जांपल देता हूं, इससे पहले मैं खत्म करूं। 2 रीजन हैं जम्मू एंड कश्मीर में, एक कश्मीर का एरिया है, एक जम्मू का एरिया है, बीच में एक बहुत बड़ा पहाड़ खड़ा है जिसका नाम है पीर पंजाल। हिस्टोरिकली दोनों इलाकों में, कश्मीर आज की डेट में 100% इस्लामिक है प्रैक्टिकली, और जम्मू में 40% मुस्लिम्स हैं, 60% हिंदूज हैं, और बड़े प्यार से रहते हैं वहां पे, क्योंकि कुछ बहुत सारी कहानियां बाद में बताऊंगा। तो कहने का ये था कि जो कश्मीर में प्रॉब्लम शुरू हुई, उसका इंपैक्ट पहले जम्मू में नहीं आया। ऑलमोस्ट हाफ ए डिकेड जम्मू एरिया में कुछ नहीं हुआ, फिर लेट 90s में हुआ, और उसके बाद फिर हिल खाका ऑपरेशन हुआ, वो काबू कर लिया गया। कश्मीर वादी के लोगों का, हमारी तरफ के जो मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन दोनों तरफ थी, उनका आपस में मेल जोल नहीं था। पुंछ से अगर आपको चलना है 10 घंटे में जम्मू, 10 घंटे और जाके श्रीनगर, तो 20 घंटे में पहुंचते थे। फिर हमने स्ट्रेटेजिक इकोनॉमी में सोचा कि क्यों ना एक हाईवे बनाया जाए जो दोनों एरियाज को जोड़ दे। तो आज रजौरी पुंछ से एक रोड जाती है, पीर की गली, आपने नाम सुना होगा, और ये शोपियां में उतरती है। तो जहां 20 घंटे में आप पहुंचते थे, अभी आप पहुंचने लगे 4 घंटे में। उसके बाद नहीं, बहुत अच्छी डेवलपमेंट है। अब इसका आप जियो इकोनॉमिक्स पे आइए, तो दोनों रीजन्स में मेल जोल शुरू हो गया, शादी ब्याह होने लगी जो आज तक नहीं हुए थे। तो अभी क्या हुआ है कि जिस फिलॉसफी और जिस थॉट ने कश्मीर में गदर किया, वो फिलॉसफी और वो थॉट रजौरी पुंछ में आ गई। तो डेवलपमेंट तो बड़ी अच्छी लगी। इसलिए मैं कहता हूं, शायद हमें एक टेम्पलेट जिसमें यह कहा जाता है कि सड़कें बनाने से सब अच्छा होगा, पॉसिबली हमें एरिया वाइज और उसका क्या नुकसान हो सकता है वो हमें समझ रखनी पड़ेगी। और ये मेरा पॉइंट है, हमारी जड़ें काट दी जाती हैं और हम तालियां बजाते रहते हैं, तो ये हमें समझना पड़ेगा। और जैसे मैंने कहा, जब भी कोई डिसीजन होता है और अच्छा डिसीजन होता है और उसके खिलाफ कोई जनता खड़ा होती है, तो आप यही देखना, वो अनअकाउंटेड, अनइलेक्टेड और पावरफुल बंदा होगा। वही हमारी डीप स्टेट है। थैंक यू।
In fact, Abhijit ji's YouTube channel is very prominent and probably one of the first which started on geopolitics. And Abhijit ji is also a physicist. I mean, multi-dimensional, multi-talented. So my question, Abhijit ji, to you is this: how well are we prepared to deal with new dimensions of conflicts? Because ऐसा नहीं कि we are peacefully rising. We had a Pakistan problem. Now we have a Bangladesh problem. And there are multiple other things. And then, you know, just to take this issue, it is important that we maintain peace with our neighbors so that we can grow peacefully. ये जो चाइना के साथ अभी जो हुआ, some kind of a truce, do we really think everybody is happy about it? Not. A lot of countries are not happy that they would have preferred a war. It would have cut both of us to size. So coming to this issue, once we solve one, probably multiple other challenges are coming up. There are new challenges for which the existing architecture may not be ready to deal with. What is your view on that?
Thank you. Great question, sir. So India faces a very unique threat environment. We live in a very interesting neighborhood, as we know, and we have, at this point in time, we are essentially surrounded by proxies of more powerful nations. If you look at Pakistan, it used to be a proxy of China, the iron brother of China, but in 2022, with the coup against Imran Khan, we have now a very strongly pro-US government in Pakistan. We have Afghanistan, which has the Taliban, which is getting a monthly stipend of 50, 70, whatever $million in cash from the United States. So once again, that's a US proxy. Maldives is a Chinese proxy to a certain extent. Sri Lanka is somewhere in the middle. Bangladesh or East Pakistan is a newly minted US vassal state. Nepal is a battleground between the US and China. And we have Burma, which is in the middle of a civil war, which is a proxy war between the US and the Chinese. And in the middle, we have us. We have a very, very interesting threat environment. And it's not just these external threats, we are also facing threats from within. So India is a nation that, like many other nations, we are not unique in this, we are deeply penetrated, compromised, at various levels. Okay, and this has been happening since the 20th century. I mean, India became independent. India was granted independence in 1947, around 50 or wherever it was. But the structure of the state never changed. We continued the same institutions, the same government machinery, etc., that the British had created. The Constitution is essentially a continuation of the 1935 Act and so on. So we are, to a significant extent, still colonized, and many of the regimes that ruled India acted in interests that were not India's interests. I can give many examples, but we'll not go into that. So we are deeply penetrated and compromised even today. That's one of the threats we're facing. We have illegal immigration that's happening from the Bangladesh-Bengal border. In 2014, the government had issued a statement that we have about 50 million illegal Bangladeshis living in India. Today, the number would be much larger. We also have Rohingyas now who have been settled in various parts of the country. So there is that. So a lot of threats, lots of problems. And we were supposed to, we are the one nation in the global south that is very, very strongly anglicized. And so we have a good relationship with the West. But it turns out that for the US perspective, they see India as a nation with a very limited amount of utility as a counterweight and counterbalance to China. And ever since the regime change in the US through the election process in 2020, the Democrats came to power. Biden is the de facto, whatever, so-called president. But we know it's not Biden who's ruling the country. That's very obvious. So ever since that happened, the Americans have gone essentially, like, you know, they've poured a lot of heat on India. And after February 2022, special military operation in Ukraine, when India refused to condemn the invasion and India refused to participate in the sanctions, the heat has been even more from a variety of quarters, not just the United States, but all of its proxies like the EU, like NATO, like Canada, even Japan, and so on. So we are facing a lot of heat. Now, China is also facing a tremendous amount of heat from the US. It started during the time when Donald Trump was the president. He started the trade and tariff war against China. So China is facing the heat, and Biden's regime has continued that, then they've taken it to the next level. So China finds itself in a position where the Western market is getting closed off to it, and it needs a large market for its exports. And naturally, it's natural that the only existing alternative is the Indian market, which is right next door to China. So India is facing the heat from the US in a variety of ways. China is facing the heat in a different set of ways. And because of that, the situation has now, it's now, the situation is that India and China, it makes sense for them to enter some kind of modus vivendi and cooperate and collaborate on certain matters. Now, we have to be very careful in understanding that China is not our friend. We have tremendous problems with China, and most of these are of Chinese, or have been created by the Chinese. So we will have to be very careful. We will have to take this relationship one day at a time with China. We will have to keep on verifying their actions, keep on monitoring their actions very closely. But there is, and if you look at the Chinese perspective on India, the US perspective on India, both of them would be very happy if India were to be balkanized, if India were to be break up. The US would be very happy with that. That's a great goal for them. Even the Chinese have even written about this, that they would like India to be balkanized, they would like India to be broken up into various states. But there is one fundamental difference in the approach of the Americans and the Chinese. The Americans will not be content with balkanizing India. They also want to eradicate Indian culture and civilization. The Chinese have no issue with Indian culture and civilization. They only see India as the only large nation in Eurasia that can challenge them in the long run. And that's why they've been pursuing various policies vis-a-vis India. So it's very logical. So right now we may be entering a phase where we will cooperate with China to a certain extent, and we will need confidence building measures, etc. And we'll have to be very careful. We'll have to take it one step at a time. Maybe RIC may happen. Maybe BRICS will. BRICS obviously is now a very attractive economic bloc for all the disenfranchised nations of the global south, etc., which are looking for alternatives to the US system. So BRICS is very attractive for that. And the basic pillars of BRICS is the RIC bunch of nations, Russia, India, China. So very interesting times we are living in. What can we do to make our position better? We need to make create facts on the ground. So one great thing we are doing is we are engaging in this in investing in ports across the Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific region. If we, we have a port in Chabahar, we have a port in Tukum, we have Agalega in Mauritius. Sri Lanka is a reasonably friendly country. We have nations like Singapore. Philippines is kind of an ally of India. So we are building ports, we are building infrastructure, which shows that this government is ambitious. It is thinking in the long term thinking we are seeing. And India is finally beginning to behave like a nation that sees itself as a great power. So we have a lot of challenges in front of us. The US, deep state, whatever you want to call them, they see us as a long-term challenger. By a 2040, 2050 horizon, we could most likely be the next China if our economy keeps on growing the way it is growing. So the US doesn't want that to happen, which is why they are going all out against India. Nothing personal, it's all business, like they'll say. So it's gonna be a tough ride ahead for us the next decade or two, like General Sir was saying. But I am pretty confident that we will have the resilience and the fortitude to tide this time over, and we will once again reach the place which we have historically occupied throughout history as the world's largest economy. So I'm pretty confident about that. Thank you.
So we'll start with the concluding remarks, and there's a question that I would first take. I mean, the speakers can include the answers for this, their responses in this concluding remark also. One very interesting question that has come is that, how does the US look at what has happened with China and India between the agreement that has happened, and whether will it affect tech transfer of critical tech like jet engines and semiconductors? So we start with Ambassador Sir. Concluding remarks for 2 minutes and with this.
Well, United States may be not entirely happy that we will resume some kind of a high-level dialogue with China. But they have to adjust to changing circumstances. They can't take a simplistic view simply because India has opened the doors to China, and therefore it needs a total revision of their policy. Policies are not made like that. After all, United States has been building up China for so many years. We've never made it an issue that since United States has actually fueled China's growth all these years and neglected us, and therefore that should be the reason for us not to go closer to China, to the United States. It doesn't happen like that. They have to, it's not, they also look ahead and they can make their own analysis, how deep this road to reconciliation with China is. Is it just limited? Because there are some fundamental contradictions between China and India. China believes in the philosophy that there can't be two tigers on one mountain. And in the Asian mountain, the only other tiger is India. So they will, and beyond that, they want either to rival the United States as a power, or at best, accept a G2 situation, which means that India should be a relatively subaltern power in Asia to China, which India will never accept, which Russia won't accept. Then there are these sovereignty issues for China. These are all interlinked. They can't make concession to India on sovereignty issues with India without making concessions on sovereignty issues in South China Sea, East China Sea, or Taiwan and all that. Because once they make concession in one area, then pressure will mount on them to make concessions in other areas. So they have to have a consistent policy. And then once they see that India is strengthening its ties with the United States, we are part of Quad, the whole Indo-Pacific concept. Our trade with the United States is growing. United States is supplying us military capacities, which are actually aimed at China, at building up a capacity vis-a-vis China, whether it is in the maritime domain or surveillance in general. So they see that. And that will remain a factor in their calculations because they like to keep India on the defensive. And then, of course, Pakistan. They will never give up because it's a very useful instrument in their hands to strategically contain India. And they will continue to use that. And in our neighborhood, they'll play the neighbors against us. because that also, from their point of view, puts some brake on India extending its power beyond South Asia or a larger extended neighborhood. So these are all fundamental contradictory factors between China and India, which United States will take into account. And therefore, simply because a dialogue has started with Xi is not going to change,
Right.
result in any fundamental change of their thinking at present towards us.
Right. General sir, your concluding remarks, sir. Yes, please.
ओके, तो इसमें केवल यही कहना है कि भारत जैसे वो यूएसए के साथ संधि वगैरह किया है, तो एक जियोपॉलिटिक्स में कहते हैं हेजिंग बेट्स। तो उन्होंने फ्रांस के साथ भी किया है, रशिया के साथ भी किया है, अभी तो यूके भी दौड़ के आ रहा है, अभी तो जर्मनी भी दौड़ के आ रहा है, स्पेन भी दौड़ के आ रहा है, और इटली भी तैयार है आपके साथ। तो जैसे वो कहते हैं ना, तू नहीं और सही, और नहीं और सही। तो कितना दम है अगर वो बोलेगा कि मैं इंजन नहीं दूंगा, उसी का लॉस है। और उनके अंदर जो मिलिट्री इंडस्ट्रियल कॉम्प्लेक्स है बहुत ताकतवर है, वो पीछे पड़ जाएंगे कि हमारी वाट लगा दोगे आप यार, हमारे बिजनेस कम हो जाएगा, धंधा मंदा हो जाएगा, तो वो अलाउ करेंगे। तो इट प्लेस बोथ वेज। तो इसमें इसीलिए कहते हैं एक इसमें जियोपॉलिटिक्स में होता है एक सिस्टम कॉल्ड नेट असेसमेंट, कि आप अपने देश और दूसरे देश के बारे में पूरे विस्तार से असेसमेंट करते हो, उसके बाद अपनी ये सारे हेजिंग बेसिक और कोर पॉलिसीज वगैरह निकालते हो। तो कोई बताता नहीं है, मगर देखने में क्लियर समझ में आ जाता है कि बेट अच्छी तरह से हेज करके रखा हुआ है आपने। और मैं पूरी तरह से एम्बेसडर साहब से सहमत हूँ कि चीन पे बिल्कुल कभी भरोसा करना ही नहीं है, बिल्कुल भरोसा करना ही नहीं है। अभी मेरे हिसाब से थोड़ा कमजोर पड़ा है वो, तो जितना उससे ऐंठ सकते हैं ऐंठ लो, यही मौका है। थोड़ा जैसे ही वो अंदरूनी मामले से जैसे ही उलझ के निकल आएगा, पलटवार करेगा आपके ऊपर। क्योंकि उनका कहना है, चियांग काई शेक ने भी कहा था, माओ त्से तुंग ने भी कहा था, शी जिनपिंग भी उसी पॉलिसी को फॉलो करता है कि ऊपर एक ही सूरज हो सकता है, मतलब एशिया में केवल चाइना और उसका कॉम्पिटिटर है भारत। तो अभी आप समझ लो। थैंक यू।
सुशांत जी।
I'll add something to what General Saab said. And this is a common problem in India. Every single debate anywhere, the question which is most popular, should we trust China? Should we trust Pakistan? And I hold my head in despair. In international relations, you trust no one. No one. No one is your friend. Every country has interests. As long as your interests will match, you will do business with them. Otherwise, you'll look away. You can keep hedging your bets, but also remember that the other guy is also hedging his bets. So it's not only you who get a vote, the other guy also gets a vote. So we need to be careful on that. The next point I want to make, and I know Sanjay Dixit is not going to call me next time. I think every time I say come to Jaipur Dialogues, Sanjay ji thinks कि यार इसको क्यों बुलाया, अगली बारी नहीं बुलाऊंगा, अब लेकिन बुला लेते हैं. Let me say something very, very clearly. Let us decide, are we a great power right now or not? If we are not a great power, right, then why are we trying to act like one? And if we are a great power, then why are we being paranoid by various small things, irritants? Great powers will have irritants. Look at China. I wonder how many people in this room have read the opening statement of the Chinese president. I don't like the Chinese at all, right? But let me say one thing. Let's learn from the enemy. Look at the opening statement of the Chinese president. The Chinese outscore us by a margin of by many X, right? It has got global ambitions. It's a global superpower in terms of manufacturing, in technology, in a range of issues, while we are still trying to play catch up. And we have to recognize that difference. But look, the Chinese president sits with the Indian prime minister, and what does he say? He says, you know, like India, China is also a developing country. We are members of the global south. Okay? He's not saying, I am the superpower. I am going to decide what is going to happen. He is, and he's made the mistake in the past and he's got a pushback. So they are recalibrating their position. They have learned. We are, on the other hand, every second day, our news channels and everybody else is declaring India has become the next superpower. The fifth biggest economy, fourth biggest economy, with a per capita income of $2,400, $2,400. $2,400. Are you serious? Fifth biggest economy? It doesn't matter. You have islands of prosperity, and that's not good enough. Your labor is still not productive. Your industry is still not productive. So we have a lot of work to do, lot of policies to change, lot of hard work to do. और हम ये कर सकते हैं कि ठीक है यार, आए हैं, लंबी लंबी बातें करते हैं, फेंकते हैं, and that's it. Let's get down to doing the hard work, keep our mouths shut, bide our time, build our strength before we try to challenge the world. That's my.
I just want to add one thing. Sushant ji, what he said is very right. We are not a superpower. That is a reality. And I don't think we even want to be one. We just want to be left on our own. But it is also a reality. We are a fifth largest economy. So we are just acknowledging where we have done a little bit of work. Does not mean at all that we have achieved the zenith or we are, second to none. I think both sides are equally right. So there is a very interesting question for Colonel Raina कि जम्मू वाले problem तो बता दी पर solution नहीं बताए.
टॉपिक मेल नहीं खाता आज के सब्जेक्ट के साथ. इसके बड़ा लंबा टॉपिक है तो सोल्यूशन एक नहीं होती है. मैं हमेशा कहता हूं कि जब आपके सामने एक पहाड़ जो 70 साल से खड़ा है प्रॉब्लम बन के, उसको आपको डिफरेंट लेवल पे पूरे देश का होल ऑफ नेशन अप्रोच लगानी पड़ती है. उसको आप पीस मील नहीं कर सकते. जैसे कहते हैं कि आपकी लॉन्ग टर्म स्ट्रेटजी है, आपने 2047 में सुपर जो भी बनना है, उसी तरीके से इस प्रॉब्लम को कैसे सॉल्व करना है और किस स्टेप से चलना है, वो ना तो ये ओवरनाइट हो सकता है. जैसे सुबह आज राउंड टेबल में बात हुई कि एक आइडिया मैंने दिया था कि आप आर्मी पब्लिक स्कूल जो हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स में हैं कश्मीर में, आप वहाँ पे हॉस्टल खड़ा कर दीजिए. बिकॉज बच्चे वहाँ पढ़ने आते हैं, वो 6 घंटे स्कूल में आते हैं और उसके बाद वो 18 घंटे घर में रहते हैं जहाँ पे वो उल्टी बातें सुनते हैं. आप उनको आइसोलेट कीजिए एंड साल में 11 महीने उनको हॉस्टल में रखिए और 12वें महीने उनको भारत घूमने के लिए भेज दो छुट्टियों के टाइम पे. तो आप क्या कर रहे हैं कि आप एक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जोन को पहले आइसोलेट कर रहे हैं और उसके अंदर आप पॉकेट्स प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं, एक पॉकेट पर डिस्ट्रिक्ट. जैसे हमारे देश के अंदर 300-400 पाकिस्तान किसी ने बनाए, तो क्यों बनाए? इसी का रिवर्स करने की जरूरत है. हमें उस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जोन के अंदर ऐसी पॉकेट्स क्रिएट करनी है जहां पे लोग तिरंगे को उठाएं और सल्यूट करें. तो अगर हम ये कहें कि ये 2 दिन में हो जाएगा, नहीं हो सकता. ये 20-25 साल की लड़ाई है. तो ये बहुत बड़ा टॉपिक है. आई नॉट कम टू दैट. आई जस्ट कंक्लूड माय थिंकिंग कि अभी जिस टाइम में हम रह रहे हैं, विश्व एक चरण में निकल रहा है और हम सुपर पावर नहीं है. इसको समझने के लिए सबसे पहला मेरी रिकमेंडेशन है कि टीवी की न्यूज देखना बंद कर दीजिए, बिकॉज वो रोज हमें सुपर पावर बनाते हैं. तो आई एग्री विद इट. बट एक और अब मजे की बात देखिए, जो चल रहा है दुनिया में, एक टाइम ऐसा भी आएगा कि हम शायद ऊपर चींटी की चाल से जाएंगे, दुनिया सीधी नीचे को जाएगी. तो शायद डिफैक्टो हम ऐसी जगह पे पहुंच जाएंगे हम बाकियों से ज्यादा स्ट्रांग दिखें. उसके लिए हमें सावधान होके, जब दुनिया लड़ेगी तो हमें तमाशा देखना चाहिए, बीच में नहीं घुसना चाहिए, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट को अवॉइड करना चाहिए. थैंक यू.
So, yeah, Abhijit ji, there's a question I want to ask you, like one of the from audience has asked this, that for the sake of geoeconomics on, the development model that we have today, on one hand, it is making a lot of major strides, but at the same time, AI is eating up jobs. So how do we deal with this contradiction that on one hand, you would have economic growth, but may end up creating unemployment as well?
Yes, we are living in the age of AI, and AI. See, thus far, I haven't really seen AI eating up jobs. Thus far, it's not happened thus far. I mean, when it came, people were saying that we will have developers going out of business, we'll have graphic designers going out of business, and so on. It's not happened thus far, but it is certainly something that can happen. So, what can India do about this? First of all, we need to have our own AI system. We don't have one, right? We have a tremendous amount of data in this country. I mean, the Aadhaar stack and all of that. It's a tremendous amount of data of 1.4 billion people. First of all, we need to make sure that we safeguard our people's data. Okay, we should not allow foreign powers to come and access our data. Right now, everything we do is being monitored. Our phone is always listening to us. Hey Siri, she's always listening, and our location information. So we need to find solutions to these problems. A lot of our data is going outside the country, and we need to develop our own AI and find our own solutions. India obviously is a low income country at this time, and we will need to provide jobs for everybody. So we cannot allow the infiltration of AI too much in the country. I think job loss can happen when AI merges with robotics, and then you have robotic factory floor workers and all that, which will take away the manual labor jobs and all. So we can choose to not implement that at this point in time. But yes, it's certainly a big threat for us.
Can I ask?
Yes,
Just a second.
Please,
Can
please.
I ask Abhijit a question? We keep talking about keeping our data with us. What do you do about a government in which the armed forces,
Uber. I know.
Gmail,
Gmail.
GPay, Google Pay,
Yeah.
right? WhatsApp Pay, but okay, all of that, but your Navy and Air Force officers tie up with Uber, and Uber is advertising that personalized profiles of all officers and their families will be
Wonderful,
made.
isn't it?
And some idiot air marshal signs on it and then posts it with great pride as though he's done some great achievement. What security, what great power status does a country like this have?
That is very concerning, very good point you've raised over here. And then there's the question of Starlink. Okay, Starlink wants to operate in India. They will not operate in China, they will operate in India. So whenever there's a law and order situation and the government wants to switch off the internet for 48 hours or whatever, Starlink will be beamed in there, and then the rioters can organize and do whatever they want. We have separatists in various parts of the country, terrorists, cookie terrorists, they will be able to organize whenever they want at will. And we have no control, the government will be helpless. So we need to take good decisions at the top levels and not allow such things to happen. Very, very important point you've raised. Absolutely.
General sir, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, this is about the issue about AI eating jobs. Yes, the particular type of jobs you're doing will go. You got to reskill for the new types of job which the AI is going to provide. So you got to keep that in mind. Like people say, additive manufacturing will kill jobs. Yes, the manner in which you're doing a job, that will change, but it will create a different type of job. So you got to keep reskilling yourself. अपने आप को और दूसरे type of job के लिए train करके तैयार करिए. वो हर वक्त होता है. जब कंप्यूटर्स आए थे बहुत कुछ बोला था, ये बंद हो जाएगा, वो बंद हो जाएगा, ये बंद हो जाएगा. नहीं, नए चीजें शुरू होती हैं. अभी जैसे एडिक्टिव मैन्युफैक्चरिंग आएगा तो जिस तरह से आप वो मैन्युफैक्चर कर रहे हो उसके सिस्टम्स को भी तो रिपेयर करना है आपको. तो जो रिपेयर ये आज के इक्विपमेंट को रिपेयर कर रहा है वो उसको रिपेयर नहीं कर सकता. हाँ, इसका जॉब जाएगा, लेकिन अगर उसने तैयारी कर ली कि वो दूसरे टाइप का जो इक्विपमेंट आया उसको कैसे रिपेयर करना है मैं तैयारी कर लूंगा, तो वो जॉब बदली हो गई. तो यस, मैं ये नहीं कहता कि हर एक जॉब जो जाएगा उसके बदले में दूसरा जॉब आएगा. ये भी नहीं है कि बहुत सारे जॉब चले जाएंगे, आपको नए तरह के जॉब मिलेंगे.
No, Sushant ji, the issue that you raised, I must thank you for that, because that Uber collaboration with Air Force is a shocker. It's a shocker. Yeah, sir.
It's a big shocker. It's a major security breach because the servers are abroad. You cannot be putting up your defense service officers and their families' profile there. I don't know what they were smoking when they did that.
I think the question is about ministry sharing data with Google, right?
Yeah, that's itself.
I think
Anything you serve, your data is the next oil. अगली लड़ाई डेटा के ऊपर होने वाली है। और आप अगर खुल के अपना डेटा सर्वर्स जो बाहर विदेश में बैठे हैं उनको दे रहे हो, तो आप तो आपका सिक्योरिटी पूरा खाली कर रहे हो, देश की सिक्योरिटी को हानि पहुंचेगा। और उसके ऊपर ये ऊबर से क्यों किया? ओला से करना था। ओला ने अपना सर्वर बनाया है, अपने देश में अपना सर्वर बनाया, तो ऊबर से क्यों किया? आपको करना था टैक्सी, तो ओला से करते।
सर कैन आई 30 सेकेंड्स?
या प्लीज।
तो किसने किया? ना वो इलेक्टेड है, ना वो अकाउंटेबल है, लेकिन उसके पेन की पावर है। तो आपने जुडिशरी आइडेंटिफाई की थी, आपको एक चीज और आइडेंटिफाई करनी है बीच में। That's the point.
नहीं, but one thing in the last 10 years at least sensitive sectors में Chinese investment के ऊपर थोड़ा रोक आई है। जो उसके पहले किया गया, I don't know what has been done with that, but at least some restrictions have been made. I'm not saying it's foolproof, and data sharing with these tech giants is something which is वो चलता रहेगा तो फिर कोई आत्मनिर्भरता नहीं होगा. We need to find solutions for that. On that note, we come to the conclusion of this session. This question by Nisha Chandrani ji and Asim Rastogi has been selected for a award which is on AI. The award would be a book that will be given by the Jaipur Dialogue. Where is the book? Is it there? Yeah. This question has been selected. Over the book to the person who raised the question, please.
The name of the book is India is a Country, Not a Company, How US Imported Economists Misled and Mismanaged Indian Economy.
I would request everyone to give a compliment and a big clap for this wonderful